Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's edition of State of the Yankees. Today is October 7th, 2018, and boy, we have a lot to cover. It's playoff season, it's playoff time, most exciting time of baseball, October. Just to give you a quick recap, because a lot has happened over the past week, and ultimately we're only going to spend about a minute or two on this, because even though there has been a lot going on, absolutely none of it matters, because now that we're in the division series, the next game is always more important than every game played to date. So while there's been a lot going on throughout the season and the wild card and other series, none of them matter. Only the next game, game 3 matters, and then only game 4 matters, etc. So to recap where we left off last week, we were going into the season finale of a meaningless game against Boston. Boston won, who cares? They take the season series 10-9, and it doesn't even matter. Yankees then go into the wildcard game hosted in New York, and they outright dominate Oakland. I couldn't be more proud. They did awesome. Severino was lights out. He didn't go particularly deep, but he gave us everything we needed, highlighted by Judge and Stanton home runs. Gave us the emotional ride and uplift that we needed going into Boston. It really cemented our readiness for the postseason. We had all hands on deck, everyone came, everyone played hard, and we just rocked the Athletics. Awesome. Okay. So before we get into the much anticipated ALDS coverage, given that Game 1 and Game 2 have already ended and it's now tied 1-1, I'll be going into Games 3 through 5 and what to expect and what to look out for. But let's give a quick overview of the other series going on. There's Milwaukee and Rockies, LA and Atlanta, and Houston and Cleveland. So given that all three of those series are 2-0 in favor of the respective teams, Milwaukee, LA, and Houston, I do think that the Rockies and Braves will not go down quietly, and they'll probably win a game, maybe 2, but I think that might be pushing it. I definitely think the three teams that have a 2-0 lead are going to end up winning those series. Houston is just way too good. Between Boston, New York, and Houston, we are the only 3 teams in the entire major leagues that have 100 wins. They're going to shut out Cleveland in 3 games and get plenty of rest while they watch the Yankees and Boston duke it out. So, now, on to the much anticipated ALDS of New York-Boston. It just doesn't get any more exciting than this. Well, except maybe to football fans who are watching maybe the Eagles and Cowboys duking it out in the playoffs. That would be kind of exciting. But in baseball terms, it just doesn't get any more exciting than Boston-New York. It is like the pivot of baseball awesomeness, for lack of a better word. As predicted on Facebook prior to Game 1, New York lost Game 1, but won Game 2. These were the easy ones to pick. Fundamentally, the pitching matchups kind of dictated what was going to happen. It didn't necessarily go exactly as I may have thought it might have, but the end result was the same. You had in Game 1, Sale versus Happ. Now, Happ being absolutely phenomenal down the stretch since we got him from Toronto, being sub 2.0 ERA and winning 7 games, you would have expected a strong performance. Instead, he more or less laid an egg, giving up 5 runs in his very abbreviated 3 or 4 innings turnout. Granted, the Yankees did fight back, but highlighted with home runs by Judge and Stanton, I believe it was. No, I think it was, well, at least Judge hit a home run. That's what matters to me. In any event. But fundamentally, you're going up against Chris Sale. I mean, he's one of the most elite pitchers in the game. He's like a Roy Halladay or a Clayton Kershaw or a Max Scherzer. You just don't beat them, okay? You're not going to get to them, especially in October. Or even a Madison Bumgarner when he pitched 3 games in the World Series that one year. It's just, these are elite pitchers. The only way to beat them is to get them out of the game and then beat up on the bullpen. You're not going to get the best of them. You might get a few hits, but they're just one of the best in the game, really. So knowing that it was Happ versus Sale, I just knew one way or the other it was going to end up with Boston taking that game. And while the Yankees did fight back against Boston's bullpen and make it interesting in the end, falling 5-4 is a lot better than 5-0, but ultimately a loss is a loss. In Game 2, it was Price versus Tanaka. Tanaka did well last year in the playoffs, but this year he's been very inconsistent. So I kind of went into this game a little bit of mixed feelings with Tanaka, but knowing that he was facing Price, who has been historically horrendous against New York ever since he got acquired by Boston, I knew it wasn't going to be so much how well Tanaka did, but how poorly Price was going to be. And he was every bit as bad as I expected him to be. Having said that, Tanaka was far better than I ever expected he would be. Highlighted by Jokich's home run and 2 home runs by Sanchez, New York came away with what felt closer than it actually was. With a final score of 6-2, New York definitely handled their game, but against Boston in Fenway, no lead is secure. So I was nervous even up to the last out, just because of the nature of the beast. So that brings us into games 3 through 5. Game 3 played on Monday, Game 4 played on Tuesday, and if necessary, Game 5 would be on Thursday, I believe. Now, these are interesting matchups because they are far less predictable than the first 2 games. Game 3, you have Severino versus Porcello. Game 4, you have Sabathia versus Eovaldi. And then Game 5, you know Boston's, if it gets to Game 5, is going to go with Chris Sale because he's Chris Sale. Whereas New York is going to have used Severino already and already gotten a lot out of Tanaka. It would make the most sense they would start half of that, but they could go a number of different ways for a Game 5 starter. So going back to Game 3 and going in sequential order here, between Severino and Porcello, both have shown brilliance during the season and both have been vulnerable. The key to this game is going to be 2 things. 1, who scores first, and which starter leaves first. As illustrated by Games 1 and Game 2, Game 1, Boston scored first and they won the game. Game 2, New York scored first, they won the game. And in both cases, the team that lost, their starter left the game first. I think those will be key to Game 3. I think that if Sevy can go 5+ innings, and if we can get Porcello out before the 6th, I think the Yankees have the edge here. Of course, being in the home crowd of a sellout Yankee Stadium doesn't hurt. Especially if the Yankees can get on board first, forget about it. I think that they can absolutely lock the door on that one and take a 2-1 series lead. Game 4 is a little more tricky because it's Sabathia versus Eovaldi. And while Sabathia is absolutely solid and in his prime was one of the elite pitchers, he's a much older pitcher. He's like 38, 39 now. The fact that he's still pitching says a lot, is a great testament to how he's been able to reinvent himself as a pitcher. However, he's still a much older pitcher. He's a different pitcher, and he's not as elite as he used to be. Eovaldi was kind of let go by the Yankees because he just lost it. And while Tampa spent a great deal of time and energy rehabbing him to make him the pitcher he is, allowed Boston to pick him up and use him and milk him for every bit of baseball in him, Eovaldi did better than average, and against New York, he's just been unsolvable. In this game, I just don't see Sabathia going deep, and unless the Yankees figure out how to solve Eovaldi, it's going to be edge Boston on that one and send it back to Fenway for Game 5. I have hopes that somewhere, one way or the other, the Yankees manage to get a couple runs against Eovaldi early on, and Sabathia can give us his all till like the 5th or 6th. And if we can do that, then I think we have every bit of much chance to win that game and take this to the ALCS. However, if Boston does come away with the edge in this game, then we go back to Fenway for a winner-take-all, all hands on deck, Game 5. And believe me, when it's a winner-take-all game, whether it's the Division Series, the ALCS, or the World Series, it doesn't get any more interesting than that, except for maybe the next round. Having said that, as mentioned earlier, Boston easily goes with Sale on this one. You just, why would you go with anyone less than your best pitcher in the game? Okay, and probably Happ might take the game there. If it goes to Game 5, I would like to think that it would get very interesting, and the Yankees might be able to squeeze this one out. But on paper, everything sits in Boston's corner for this one. My subjective opinion for this series is that the Yankees win in 4. That they figure a way to get past Eovaldi, their bullpen locks the door, and they go see Houston in the ALCS. Objectively, being realistic about this, I think that this does somehow end up back in Fenway. Sale dominates Game 5, and they end up hosting Houston in ALCS. Now, as a diehard Yankees fan, I certainly hope it doesn't end up like that, but it wouldn't be fair if I wasn't completely objective in my analysis of the game. So, I want to know all about what you think about what I think. Please leave your comments and suggestions in the fields below, and until next week, enjoy the game. Go Yankees!